Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we are going to create a card with the new Harvest Blooms background stamp set. We're going to add color to this beautiful image a little bit differently. We're going to use the ink smooshing technique to color this background. To start, we have the gorgeous Harvest Blooms background stamp set. I love the pretty flowers in this set. This was beautifully illustrated by my very talented friend Emily. I'm going to stamp this onto an A2 panel of watercolor paper. I added some adhesive to the back and I placed it down on my mouse pad for my MISTI. I'm now going to center this stamp over the panel and then pick it up with my MISTI. By stamping or by placing my panel in the middle of my MISTI, that's going to allow me to make sure I get that whole stamp or that whole panel covered with that impression, no little gaps or anything. I did apply some anti-static powder and now I'm going to stamp this image in Versamark ink because I'm going to do some heat embossing. So I stamped it once and then I'm going to ink up the image and stamp it one more time just to make sure I get good coverage or I get that whole impression. I'll then lift up my panel and I'm going to emboss this with some black embossing powder today. This is going to have a really pretty look, hopefully kind of resembles stained glass a little bit. I'll just pour on half and then I'll pour on the other half and then I'll be ready to heat set this. You could also skip the embossing and just stamp this in a waterproof ink like Versafine Onyx Black ink. But again, I think that little shine will add a little bit of elegance and it definitely kind of give it that stained glass look. I'm going to start with Mowed Lawn Distress ink here and I'm going to smoosh it down onto a sheet of acetate. I like to do the little corner because I like to have that ink in the corner so you can see. So I can use that little corner to kind of move the ink around, which you can see me doing here quite frequently. I really like to kind of grab that little puddle of ink with the tip or the edge of the acetate and then kind of move it in and fill it in where I want that color to go. Right now I'm kind of coloring the leaves. I'm not worried about it being absolutely precise, but it is nice to have that little flexibility of moving that color around and getting things a little bit more precise. So I'm now going to clean up my acetate, clean up my workspace, and then I'm going to heat set or dry this ink. I'm going to dry pretty much every time I'm done with an application of ink. That's just to kind of set it so it doesn't move around again, and it's going to prevent it from getting too muddy. I'm now moving on to my next color. This is Crushed Olive. I'm going to add this right over where I did the mowed lawn, so it's just going to add a little bit more complexity and kind of make it more interesting, just to add some more life to it. I did smoosh it around other places on the panel just to add a little bit of that color around. I heat set it and now I'm going back to my mowed lawn. Sprayed a little less water on it this time. That's because it'll make more of these little dots of color instead of like pools of color that I can move around. This will just add more texture. Now I'm going to start on some of the flowers. I have spiced marmalade here. I'm going to color a couple of the flowers with this really pretty almost yellow-orange color. Once I finish with that spiced marmalade, I will then dry it and then I'll move on to abandoned coral. This is again going to add a little bit more interest to the image, kind of adding some dark spots and texture. I am also going to do right over where I did the spiced marmalade, kind of keep those two colors together. And once I get that abandoned coral the way I like it, I'll then heat set. And now I'm going back to spiced marmalade and adding a little bit less water this time and then adding it to my flowers. And that will just, again, kind of create more of a spotty look because it's a little drier. I'm now moving on to another color combo for some more flowers. I'm going to start with Seedless Preserves. This is a really big flower, so I do have to stop a couple times, apply some more ink to my acetate and add some water, and then go back to ink smooshing and kind of moving that color around to kind of fill out or color that whole flower. I then heat set it, and now I'm going to add some barn door. This red is just going to kind of brighten it up a little bit and just again add a little bit of texture and interest to that flower, so it's not just one note, just that Seedless Preserves color. I'm now going to move on to my very last color for my flowers. I'm just going to use Dusty Concord here for these last two flowers. Again, adding water to it so it's kind of puddly and then moving it around with the corner of the acetate so I can really fill in and get it where I want it to go. Once I finish with that Dusty Concord, I'm going to do a little bit of touch up and with some of that barn door, just a little bit more to kind of fill in some of the berries that were looking a little white, and that will actually complete my panel. I'll go ahead and dry that, and here's the finished ink smushed panel. Lots of fun, very, very loose. This is very different for me, but I think this is a good exercise in kind of playing around with how you can kind of achieve a loose look, and it's definitely a lot faster than meticulously coloring all those florals in. I'm now going to work on my sentiment. I have 3 black blusts that I die cut with the blessed honey cuts. I'm now adhering one of the black blusts onto a vellum shadow layer. Once I've added that one black blessed, I'm going to add some adhesive to another one, but this time on the top of it, and adhere it to the back side of the vellum. So right now the vellum is sandwiched by 2 black word die cuts. So now that I'm going to put aside, and I'm going to move on to my 3rd blessed. So for this one, I want to add some shine. I want to kind of mimic that beautiful black embossing powder that we used on the watercolor paper. So I pressed this blessed with the Versamark ink, dipped it in clear, and now I'm going to heat set. And I just did about half, or maybe like 2/3. And now I'm going to finish up that last third, the exact same process, dip it in the ink it up with the Versamark, dip it in the clear, and then heat set. And you can see I have this beautiful glossy sentiment now. And I'll just add some liquid glue to the back side of that and adhere it to my stacked sentiment. And here's our finished dimensional glossy blessed. I have one more sentiment that I want to create. I'm going to use the blessed stamp set here. I've just grabbed a sub sentiment from that set, inked it up with Versafine Onyx black ink, and stamped it onto a scrap of gray cardstock. I then trimmed that down to a strip. And now I have all my parts to bring this card together. I'm first going to add some liquid glue to the back side of my watercolor panel and adhere it to a A2 top folding white card base made from 110-pound cardstock. Once I have that stuck down, I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back side of my blessed stacked word die cut. Once I get that stuck down, all I have left to do is my sentiment. I am going to pop it up with some dimensions, so I have these really handy thin foam strips here. I just trimmed it a little bit, removed the backing, and stuck it down onto my card front, and that will actually complete the card. I now hold my card up to the camera so you can get a good look at this ink smushed background. This was a really fun way to add some color to the background of these florals. I really like the loose look of it, and I like how the colors kind of layer and mix. And it's a good exercise, especially for me, to kind of loosen up and let those colors kind of play a little bit. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you'd like any more information on the products I use, please head over to Honeybee. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.